Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1105 just came out, and the final battle is finally beginning. It feels like this is going to be our last run of matchups. Saturn and Kizaru are both set up, seeming like the two-headed monster that they're going to have to take down before the end of this arc, and Lucci is still out there fighting Zoro, and we assume that he's going to remain a problem at least for a little bit longer, not to mention the entire Buster Call's worth, well really, a 2 times Buster Call's worth of Marines that have surrounded the island. So everybody is kind of in battle stations, everyone's in their final fight mode, and the Straw Hats are probably going to get lined up with their final opponents for the arc in the next 1 to 2 chapters. I felt like it was happening last chapter, but it seems like Oda wanted to reset a little bit and get us the situation with all of the pacifistas shooting at Bonnie and Kuma for one more dramatic setup to kick things off. It does still seem like we're going to get Sanji versus Kizaru in some capacity. I know that that's what people were looking for last chapter. I think that that would be really interesting if we end up seeing Sanji versus Kizaru while Zoro's still fighting Lucci, because this would probably be the first time that I can recall in God knows how long that Sanji's main opponent for the arc would be someone stronger than Zoro. Although I assume that Sanji won't be taking on Kizaru solo, I wouldn't be surprised if Franky gets involved as well, and honestly that would be amazing to see, because Franky... I still feel like we should get to see something from him impressive over the course of this arc. Some upgrades that he's made. I remember in stream somebody commented that those, light gloves that Vegapunk created, those could really come in handy right now. It would be amazing if we could see Franky use that because he doesn't have Haki. And Sanji, of course, obviously, if he's got a good tag team partner like Franky, I do think that he could hold his own against Kizaru. So I feel like we've got some interesting matchups coming up with Zoro hopefully taking care of Lucci soon. Maybe he gets in on the action as well. Maybe we get to see Jinbei versus Lucci for a second. Who knows how that would go. But no matter how you spin it, between Saturn and Kizaru and all of the Marines surrounding the island, and throw in even the pacifistas, there are enough high-level opponents to go around for everybody right now. Obviously, some Straw Hats don't seem to be like they're going to be super important in terms of the action this arc. Like, Robin seems to be out of the picture. I'm not really expecting anything from Usopp or Chopper in this arc particularly. But I think the main characters, right? Zoro, Jinbei, Sanji, and of course Luffy, it does seem like they're all set up to get some type of a fight, and even Franky, which I think is much needed for him in this specific storyline. Now, fights aside, my favorite part of this chapter was actually just the simple fact that it's sort of setting the atmosphere or tone for a very serious conclusion to Egghead Island. I don't know if it's going to be that serious once Luffy gets back up, particularly in Gear 5th mode, but I did feel like throughout Egghead, as things were kind of getting going, as they're starting to make their escape, between Luffy versus Kizaru and the initial escape attempts that the Straw Hats are making, things were kind of light. Then we got the Bonnie situation where we finally understood her full flashback and her father's flashback and Kuma's arrival, and of course I think the real tone shift was when Saturn himself transformed into his demonic form. During that entire phase of the story, things definitely got more heavy. But this is the moment where it begins to feel like things are starting to get desperate, right? The Straw Hats currently are a little bit outmatched against Saturn and Kizaru. Luffy is out, Zoro is occupied, and the entire island is beginning to experience a bombardment from all sides. It does take you back to Enies Lobby a little bit, where you're seeing the Straw Hats just facing an overwhelming military force. Only this time, the expectation kind of is that they are going to have to go up against it directly and kind of overcome it. I don't think that there's going to be an easy shortcut necessarily, the same way that there was at Enies Lobby. And honestly, this time as a Yonko crew, they're supposed to be able to deal with it. Now, as the island's bombardment began, the thing that struck out to me the most, and really my single favorite moment from the chapter, actually came from Vegapunk. I've enjoyed Vegapunk as a character, but he has generally felt to me more so as a necessity for the plot to kind of explain how we have all of these special inventions in One Piece and kind of tie that into this current arc where things like the Mother Flames, the Seraphim, etc. are becoming so important, and obviously how Kuma's will was extracted, all of that stuff. But this was the first chapter that I truly felt a great deal of empathy for Vegapunk the character. The panel of Vegapunk on his knees just watching Egghead Island slowly be destroyed, and him just sadly saying, "Egghead, you kind of got this whole picture of a man, this mad genius who has been able to do everything he wanted so far, experiment freely and create and create and create. Everything that he's worked for, all of the phenomenal inventions that he's brought about in the last several decades, his entire life's work, you just see that crumbling. I feel like we really took for granted how ridiculous and amazing and how out of this world Vegapunk's inventions were and how much he was able to create on this island. But at the end of the day, this is a man who dedicated his entire life to building all of this, and seeing all of this fantasy just collapse, it's like this dream world that he so carefully and meticulously crafted over all these years is just disappearing in front of his eyes. I actually genuinely really feel like Vegapunk could turn into a very sympathetic character after the collapse of Egghead Island, because I feel bad for him. What's happening here, what's being done to him is evil. It would be like if someone went up to Oda, held up the only existing manuscript of One Piece in the world, like all 1,000 chapters, and just burned it up in front of his eyes. I feel like Vegapunk in this chapter just transformed into a much more genuinely likable character to me. Not that he wasn't likable before, but now he feels more human rather than just this crazy Brainiac Einstein-Newton combination who's just off in his own imagination, his own cloud of ideas. This suddenly grounded him and made it seem like, okay, this is a man who just lost everything. As for the dramatics with Bonnie and Kuma, I'm not too invested in that, partly because we've just been through the emotional ringer with Kuma's entire backstory. I think we got the key moment that I really wanted to see between Bonnie and Kuma just last chapter, with Kuma already saving her, hugging her, protecting her there. So this seems like, I guess, round 2 of something that we already got very effectively just in the previous chapter. But let's see where this goes. Maybe Oda's got an even more interesting idea to bring up here, which is why he's adding in a new scenario where Kuma is yet again protecting Bonnie. I do think that the idea that the pacifistas resemble Kuma adds a bit to the scenario, but again, it is something that we already saw much earlier on in the arc when there already was a pacifista that Bonnie was crying about, looking like her father, at the very, very beginning when she, Luffy, and Chopper were first exploring Vegapunk's lab. But this is of course a much more dire situation. And if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure to subscribe for more videos like this every week. And make sure to get your One Piece inspired clothing today in the Morge store. We have hoodies, sweatshirts, and t-shirts. And get your one-of-a-kind puzzle of all major One Piece characters. Link in the description below. Now that aside, the big mystery at the end of the chapter is who is going to be coming to this island. So my initial thought was the Revolutionary Army. However, viewers then pointed out in stream that it would be very, very difficult for the revolutionaries like Dragon and all of them to come here so quickly because they were just at Kamabaka Kingdom and Kuma himself only just arrived here traveling from the same location. Now, some people then went on to comment that, you know, even though Kuma has the fastest long distance travel fruit that we know of, I doubt that even if Dragon has the wind fruit that he could be able to keep up and travel the entire span from Kamabaka Kingdom over in the Paradise section of the Grand Line to here deep in the New World. That's essentially going halfway around the globe in the span of half a day. I don't know if Dragon could do that even with the wind fruit, but viewers did point out that Kuma did have to take some time to climb up the wall at Marijua, which Dragon assumedly would not have to do. However, could Dragon and the revolutionaries arrive with a full force that quickly? I don't know about that because it was mentioned that they are here and they seems to imply a group of characters. So the Revolutionary Army, I don't know. I think it would be interesting, but at the same time, I almost don't want it to be them simply because I feel like this should not be the Dragon Sabo Revolutionary Army show. I feel like this is the moment for Nika to rise up and take on Saturn, especially in front of Bonnie and Kuma. And I also think that it might just swing the scales a bit too much in the protagonist's favor if it's the Revolutionary Army of all people showing up, because I think their side would just be too stacked. Whereas right now I think the balance is pretty much perfect for tension, drama, good matchups, and so on. However, the more attractive pick that was brought up on stream was the possibility of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. Now, I love this idea, because the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, we know that they were set up in the past to be involved in some big incident. It was said that they would cause a big incident, and this wouldn't really be causing a big incident, although maybe they do something in particular in Egghead that's surprising, but at the same time, we at the very least know that they're involved in some big incident down the line. And the Egghead Island incident that's happening right now is it's already been pre-framed by Oda as a major incident. I think there would be nothing better than right now to see, with the Straw Hats so outnumbered by so many ships and so many vice admirals, for them to be able to get, cavalry reinforcements in the form of the allies that they made so many chapters ago, because that is precisely why they made those allies. If you go back and read the chapters that the Straw Hat Grand Fleet joined up with the Straw Hats, specifically what they explained to Luffy is that, look, you're really strong, but you lack numbers. Even the strongest people can't do anything without equivalent numbers to match the numbers of their enemies. That's the situation that's going on right now. Yes, they can probably match Saturn, Kizaru, Lucci, and all that, but they're gonna have difficulty once you're throwing in all these Vice Admirals and all these other battleships. This is prime territory for the Straw Hat Grand Fleet to show their usefulness, because who better to fight some Vice Admirals than guys like Bartolomeo, Cavendish, and so on. I feel like this is where they can come in most useful, and this not only helps the Straw Hats get out of the situation, but it establishes and proves why they are a Yonko crew, why they're to be respected as a Yonko empire, because they really have an empire's worth of forces backing them when it really comes down to it. They can command a territory. They cannot just be run over by, an admiral and some vice admirals and even a Gorosei thrown in. If you want to take on the Straw Hats today, you should have to set up something like what they did for Whitebeard at Marineford. I feel like we should come away from this arc feeling something like that, and I think the Straw Hat Grand Fleet would be the perfect way to hammer that in. So I'm hoping it's the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, but of course let me know in the comments below who you think it is. And finally, we have a question from the Voice of the People, my top tier of patrons. So Meek said, first time I shared a critique of Luffy, but it's sad to see how Luffy doesn't seem to be treating this event seriously. He fought for his life and for his friends against Kaido in Wano, but now we see him just pigging out when Saturn is terrorizing his crew and Kuma/Vegapunk, hoping he will come back and the Marines show Saturn why he's an emperor. So I do think that Luffy will treat the situation more seriously when he gets up. I think that in this moment, he's not necessarily pigging out. I think that he is actually in need of a certain amount of food to be able to get back into Gear 5th fighting shape. Now, it does seem odd because I feel like in the past, usually Luffy doesn't, proportional at least to the damage that Luffy's taken so far, which is really not much, and how long he's been fighting in Gear 5th, which again I don't think is that long. I feel like we only really needed Luffy to eat food that last chapter to then be able to recover, right? 1 or 2 chapters ago when somebody snuck the food over to him. It feels weird that he needs to get another bout of eating food in before he's going to be good to fight again, but the reality of it is that I think that this is more so Oda stalling for just plot purposes than anything else. At the end of the day, the moment that Luffy's back on his feet, goes Gear 5th, takes on Saturn or whoever, most likely Saturn, the arc is basically going to be wrapping up, right? It feels as though we've still got a few more things to go before that. The Bonnie and Kuma situation, fighting who's fighting Kizaru, finishing up with Lucci, etc. So Oda just needs to stall out. So it feels a little bit unnatural to me, but it seems, I think, that Oda is just forcing Luffy to have to eat more food to be able to recover in this instance than you would otherwise normally expect, because you just need some way to keep Luffy out of it till it's time for him to take the main stage and finish things off. So that's all for this chapter, but let me know what you think below, and I will talk to you all next week.